Alright, I'm going to tie one more for you today, and this one is a pattern from an old friend of mine, Krystal. This one's called a Platte River Spider, and it's a variation on the Platte River Special theme, and Chris is a big steelheader, so it's obviously got some steelhead influence. This is unusually an unweighted streamer, which you don't find very many of these days, and Chris usually fishes it on a sinking line or a sink tip line on the swing. Now, that being said, I fish this fly behind a weighted fly very often. Kind of a small profile, excuse me, small profile, lightweight feather wing streamer. And this fly works, man. I fished this fly for a long time. I've known Chris for a long time, and he's got some cool stuff, and he knows what he's talking about. So I'm going to twist one of these up for you. You can see as I'm talking, this fly is made entirely of marabou, for the most part anyway. The body, there is no body to speak of. It's just marabou that's wrapped like a hackle, and it's very lively, but does slim down in the water, but still is really breathy. Just a really cool fly, and beautiful, fun to tie. So I'm going to show you how to tie this. So I'm going to take that one out of the vise, and I'm going to put a Tiemco 200R size 4 in the vise. And I know a lot of you sort of know how I feel about the 200R in general. I don't love this hook, generally speaking, but in a big size 4, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, it's just fine, honestly. It's got a nice, beautiful curve to it. There's no arguing it. That's a pretty hook. But beautiful curve to it, and then nice 3x long shank and fairly stout wire. So for what we're going to do here, it's going to work just fine. I'm going to start with some Veevus 14-aught black, and I'm going to start this just up behind the hook eye here. And I'm going to dress about the front third of the hook shank. Like I said, this fly doesn't have a body per se. So we're just going to dress the front end of the hook. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to use some Amherst pheasant tail for the sort of little hot spot in here. Chris uses just regular ringneck pheasant, but I went to look in my cabinet for some regular red pheasant, and while I did have some, I have this beautiful Amherst pheasant feather. And there's not a lot of stuff you use this for, so I'm going to take this opportunity to use this. And I'm going to cut just 3 or 4 strands out of the tail. That's 5, but you get the idea. I'm going to cut 5 of those out of there. I'm going to measure them about a shank length long or so, and I'm going to tie them in at the back of that thread base. And you can see if they've got a curve, try to make them curve up. But I'm going to wrap over those. I might make that just a touch longer. I like that to stick out of the marabou just a bit, like so. And then I'm going to fold these butt ends back and catch them again, and then I'll trim them off. That just makes sure that they won't pull out. Anytime I've got a fiber that's sticking out of the back of a fly like that, what tends to happen is when you tie the fly on, you pull on it. If you don't have it anchored, you'll pull that right out when you tie your knot. So that's how you avoid that. Now for the body, and you can see this fly's going to go fairly quickly. I want to get us a little better focus here. See how things are going to go here. There we go. I think that's better. Yeah. So for the body, what I've got is a yellow and a brown marabou feather, and I've sort of pre-prepped these. That yellow one shows up nice. I want something with nice fluffy barbs, and if I kind of measure from the center stem back to about the end of that red pheasant, and what I want to do, and typically I'll do these together. I'll just show you actually how I do them. So I'm going to take one, doesn't matter which one's first, but I'm going to create a separation point at the tip, and I'll wet it down. Just a little spit on the fingers, like so. So I'll set that one aside, and then I'll take my brown feather, and I want it stripped about the same length. This one's got a little bit of a twist in the bottom. I'm going to take my brown feather and do the same thing, create that separation point. like so. That one doesn't show up as well. But I'm going to stack them one on top of the other with those separation points lined up with each other. Get the finished product here and you'll get a better idea of what I've done. So you can see I've got the brown stacked on top of the yellow. The inside of the feathers, of the brown feather, is facing the outside of the yellow feather, so they're stacked just like you would stack two hackle feathers. And one of the things I look for when I'm selecting a feather is I want that center stem to be very thin. I'm going to end up wrapping this like a hackle, so again, I want it to be thin. And I'll pull back that separation point. Now, rather than tie this in right at the separation point, right here where the feathers divide, I'm going to catch it there initially with the inside of the feather toward the hook, but then wrap back over the doubled back portion just to anchor that down securely. And I can pull these two butt ends up and trim them out. And I'll bump my thread forward a bit. So again, what I've got is brown on top of yellow, inside to outside. And honestly, I don't, I said brown on top of yellow. I don't know that it makes a huge difference which color is on top or bottom. You'll see they're going to intermix when I wrap them. One thing I want to make sure of, I want to have about the same amount of feather fibers on both of these. I've got a little more on the brown. I'll peel a few of those off so they end at about the same point, and then I'll grab both those feathers in my hackle pliers, like so. Now you can see this long butt end. I'm going to trim that off. That's just going to make this much easier to wrap. Now I'm going to wet my fingertips a bit, and I'm going to start to stroke these fibers back. And it's marabou, so it's not going to fold as nicely as a hackle collar, but you can see I've swept them back to one side, and I'm going to begin to wrap. And I don't really sweat this too much as I wrap. These fibers will wrap around the hook shank and kind of get twisted up. We've got plenty of chance to untangle that. And I'm kind of going a wide open spiral here. And depending on how dense you want the fly, I could stop right here. I could go, I've got one more turn here, so I'm going to throw that in there. This will be a little on the heavy side so that I'm tying off on bare stem up here at the front. I'll come over that with my thread and catch that with a bunch of good tight wraps before I release my hackle pliers. Now before I go on, I'm going to hold that back and really anchor that down. We've got fairly thick stem there. And then I can come in and trim those out. Now you can kind of just come in and fluff that up a bit. I'll use my dubbing brush in most cases. That just keeps me from stabbing that hook point that's buried in there into my fingertips. Wet your fingers just a bit. You can kind of glide that back out of the way and get the general idea. Okay, so really just a big brown and yellow mixed marabou collar. Now we're going to put a little, actually we're going to put a little flash. I always forget the flash. And if you were paying attention on that sample fly that I showed you that I tied first, I forgot to flash on that one too. But I'm going to take 3 strands of Rootbeer Krystal Flash. Rootbeer is kind of a tan color. And I'm going to tie it in up here at the center of its length and wrap back over it so half of it is on the far side. I'll pull the near side over and tie that in place. And I'll trim those just sort of at jagged lengths just beyond the end of the marabou. I'll wet that down a bit just to keep everything in place. Just a very subtle little bit of flash there. All right, now we're going to put on the mallard flank collar. And this is mallard dyed Woodduck. Just a really nice variegated feather. And the trick to this one, what we're going to do is, again, we're looking for a feather that's got a thin stem, thin center stem. And in my case, I'm going to, if I'm looking at the front side of the feather, I'm going to strip the inside of the turn. So in my case, looking at the front of the feather, it's the right side. I'm going to strip those fibers off, like so. Oh, I banged that one up pretty good showing you here. I've got another. I got a spare. I'm going to strip this side off. And this fluff off the bottom as well. So I've got a feather that looks like this. And I'm going to create a separation point here at the tip and tie this feather in, much like we just did the marabou, inside of the curve toward the hook. I'm going to anchor that down good and tight, and then in this case I'm going to fold this front end back and wrap over it again. We're going to pull on this one a little bit. It's a little harder to fold. Get that tip out of there. So I want to reinforce that tie down so I make sure I don't pull it out. So you can see with just one side of the feather, this is going to be a fairly easy job wrapping this. We just want to lead with that front stem. Just one turn in front of the other. We want it to lay nice and flat as we go. Three turns or so. Don't want to get too much up into that thick stem. And then tie that off with a couple of turns. Trim that stem out. Ooh, get in there. And then again, anchor that down tightly before you go too much further. We just want a little head area left up here at the front. Again, I'll use the brush to sort of spread those fibers out. They're very webby. As you can see, that adds a little variegation to the front of the fly. God, that's a pretty fly, isn't it? All right, so the wing on this is sort of a traditional Platte River special wing. And what we're looking for is a couple of feathers. We've got a yellow and a furnace neck feather. Okay, so these are from Chinese or low-grade neck feathers. And what I want to do is I want to take my first yellow feather and measure it just about, a shank and a half, shank and a quarter long. And I'll trim it off at that point. And what I like to do is just strip some fibers off the bottom. So I've just got a blank like that. And I'll set that on my desk. Then I'll take my brown feather and I'm going to lay it on top of the first feather. And I'll even the tips up. And strip the fibers off the bottom of it so it matches up to the same length. So we've got these two feathers stacked up, one on top of the other. I'm not holding that very well. There we go. You can see the furnace and yellow on this side, yellow and furnace from that side. So that's my wing blank on one side. I'll take that and run that in my mouth and just get it a little bit wet and set it down on my desk. So I'm going to do that here in real life with my two yellows. So these are the feathers I'm going to use. I'm going to take these two yellows and even their tips up and get my measurement. And I'll trim them off at that point. Try to get them both at the same time. Strip just a few fibers off the bottom. And then I set these on my desk with the outsides up. And I'll take my two brown feathers and do the same thing. Okay, I'm going to measure. I measure those against the yellow. So I'll put the tips together. Like so. And then I'm going to cut that brown feather to the same length, the end of that bare stem of the yellow. Strip a little bit of those fibers off the butt end. What we're trying to do, I'm making this look complicated, but what we're trying to do is get two feathers that are the same width, same length, and get them matched up. And to be perfectly honest with you, when I was a kid, I tied tons of Platte River specials. So I sort of developed this method to do these in bulk. So I'll match those up, wet the tips just a bit, like so, and I'll set that down on the desk. So I'd go through and make all the wing sets ahead of time so I could just sit down and tie and not have to fiddle with each wing set for each fly. And that's still the best way to do this. You can see it's a slow process, especially when you got an audience watching. It's not very interesting. So I made the second wing set. And I'll wet the tips of those. And when you lick these, it just makes them stick together, so they're not going to come apart as they sit on your desk. And I'll usually I do 100 sets at a time. So then when I go back to pair them up, I'm going to turn one set with the yellow side up, so concave up, and then place the other set concave down on top of it. And this is how we make a matched wing set. So you can see furnace on the outside on both sides and yellow in the middle. And what I've got down here at the butt end are those exposed bare stems. What I'm going to do here, now that I've got these matched up, the tips are matched up the same length, I'm going to cut those stub ends so that they're all the same length. I'm going to come in and I want to smooth my thread head area off. A lot of times tying that mallard flank feather off, you'll have a little lump from that stem because it is coarse. But I want to smooth that off a bit. And then I'm going to catch those 4 feathers across the hook shank. And I want them one next to the other, so 4 across. And I'll wrap back over them with these feathers right on top, right up to the base of that mallard flank. And I want to make sure that's centered. Boy, that's pretty centered. Honestly, I wasn't trying that hard. That's pretty centered, right dead down the center of the shank. I'll kind of wet my fingers here, and I'm going to build a little thread head. I want to cover up any stems we've got. I like to build a sort of a steelhead-esque sized head, so fairly small, but a little on the bulbous side. And then I'll whip finish that black thread. And again, to the steelhead angle, I'm going to take and put a little Solarez Bone Dry. This is Bone Dry Plus. Bone Dry Plus does not stink as bad as regular Bone Dry. I'm going to take just a little drop of this if I can get it to come out of the bottle. Come on. There we go. Put a little on my needle here. I want to work this all the way around. Just gloss up that head a bit, like so. And I'll take my lamp and I'm going to cook that. Just rotate the fly as it cooks. And I can sort of blend my wing back together, dry them out a little. And that is our beautiful, if I do say so myself, Platte River Spider. Such a pretty fly. Us trout guys don't get a chance to tie a lot of truly beautiful flies. I think they're all beautiful, but this fly is just, that's a knockout. But that's the Platte River Spider, Krystal's Platte River Spider. Fairly simple, quick fly to tie, especially if you prep those wings ahead of time. But it's got some good technique that you probably haven't used on other things. But sort of a spay style trout streamer. So if you're into trout spay, this is a good fly to sort of cut your teeth on. And if you're just looking to throw something behind a bigger streamer that's a little bit more subtle and maybe the fish don't see every day, like the average bugger, this might be a good one to throw in your box. But that was fun for me. I hope you guys like that. I haven't done one of those for a while, and that was fun. So there it is, Krystal's Platte River Spider, you guys. Thanks for watching. There'll be more. Maybe I'll do another one today. We'll see. I'm back to the black shirt, you can see. I just thought that fly looked good on a black background. So anyway, there you go. You guys have a good day. Take care.